It's not so much nature versus nurture, but nature in relation to nurture. The geneticists would say results in Clark Kent's transformation into Superman. When it comes to Brightburn, Brandon was also a special child from another world that was sent to Earth. But unlike Superman, who came to Earth as a refugee, Brandon was a one-man invasion force. His powers, like Superman, are the result of his extraterrestrial genetics, but instead of using them to help others and become a symbol of hope, Brandon puts his abilities towards nefarious purposes and transforms into a symbol of despair. While it can be argued that his mind is torn between the loving person the Bryars want him to be and his hereditary instinct which drives him towards evil, the film asks, can a child's loving upbringing override their inherent nature and help mold them into a positive icon for good? And answers no. The film opens in the year 2006 with a spaceship crash landing on the Bryar property. After finding an infant child inside the ship, the couple choose to adopt the boy as their own and hide his spacecraft in the cellar to protect him. All seems to go well at first, with Brandon appearing to be everything they dreamed of, a happy, intelligent, and curious young child. But their hopes begin to crumble approaching his 12th birthday.
World. Take the world.
I need to tell you something. The other night when I found him sleepwalking, he wasn't downstairs. He was...
Did he find it?
But he was tugging at the trapdoor.
How do you even know it's in
I
there?
don't think he does. It was like he was drawing to me.
Babe, he may look like us and sound like us, but he's never bled. Not once in his whole life. He's never been cut or broken a bone or had a bruise. And now he's hurting people.
So I know that this is kind of strange. I'm your aunt and I'm also your counselor, but I'm the only one the district's got, so you are stuck with me. So Brandon, your mom tells me that you've been having some issues lately about being adopted.
Nothing bad. Only good ones.
Really? How so?
I've realized I'm special. Because my real parents aren't from a stupid place like here.
Brandon, you don't think of your mom and dad as your real parents?
I do. I just know I'm something else. Something superior.
It's right there.
That could be anything.
No. That is why he was hiding this from us last night. That is Noah's blood.
How? How could Brandon have killed Noah and then made it look like a car
He knows what
accident?
kind of weird shit he could do.
Noah was drunk and wrecked the car because you let him drive.
No, that is
and
not-
now you are trying to take out your guilt on our 12-year-old son.
Babe.
You are making a hard situation impossible.
Babe, we've got to do something. If we don't, more people are going to get hurt. More people will die. You got to be with me on this.
I will never turn against our son.
He's not our son! He is something we found in the woods.
How dare you say that to me? How dare you?
Babe, come on, he's killing us.
Although the film doesn't give us an explanation as to where exactly Brandon was from, discussions by the cast and crew during interviews seem to imply that he belonged to a powerful species of super beings from another galaxy that sent their young to other worlds in an effort to take over the universe. This is even alluded to by Brandon at school when he's asked about the differences between bees and wasps, and he explained that bees are pollinators while wasps were predators. He then expands on this by citing the example of Polistes salsifer wasps, which were unable to build their own nests and took advantage of less powerful creatures to rear their young. This is exactly what's been done with Brandon. His family had sent him, and assumedly more of his kin, to various planets to be raised by the local species, and eventually dominate the worlds as their own. And the message that Brandon receives from the ship is essentially designed to trigger his genetic predisposition towards aggressive domination. This darker side is first revealed to Kyle and Tori during his 12th birthday party, when his aunt and uncle gift him a hunting rifle, which his father refuses him to have, and Brandon disobediently acts out. On the surface, this seems like the typical reaction of an adolescent that's been told what to do, but his frustration had more to do with his predatory instincts being repressed by his father. The rifle is a symbol of power and the ability to take a life, and Brandon is a wolf in sheep's clothing, being told that he cannot be his true self. Wanting to punish the boy, Carl stops the party and demands that they leave, but when he tries to pull Brandon out of the seat, he finds that he's physically incapable of moving him. It's not until Tori pleads with Brandon to obey his father that the boy complies. Yearning to get away from town and spend some quality time together as a family, Kyle and Tori decide to take Brandon camping. Just as they're packing to leave, Tori discovers photos of swimsuit models, surgical diagrams, and graphic photos of human organs in Brandon's room. Misinterpreting these photos as pubescent curiosity, Kyle gives his son the birds and the bees talk when they go hunting, and explains that the act of sex isn't so much about the organs involved, but about the love between two people. Unfortunately, this talk ends up having the undesirable effect of inspiring the boy to sneak away and stalk his classmate Caitlin. When the Bryes return home, Kyle notices the chickens were terrified of Brandon's presence, and is awoken later that night by their screams to find that they'd been slaughtered. Although Kyle tells Tori that their son was responsible, she refuses to accept that Brandon was capable of such a thing, and brushes it off as a wolf attack, in a great example of how someone can be so wrong and yet so right at the same time. Having desensitized himself from committing violence, Brandon then attacks his first human the very next day, after falling during a trust exercise at school. Though she had shown him kindness in the past, Caitlin chooses not to catch him and calls him a pervert for creeping into her room. Forced by her teacher to help the boy up, when Caitlin extends her hand, Brandon grabs it and begins to crush every bone, leading to his suspension from school. I thought it was interesting to note that Brandon's costume begins to transform. Initially grey and white, signifying his innocence, his wardrobe slowly changes to red with each dark act he commits, until he finally assembles his Brightburn outfit, crystallizing his transition from a troubled boy to a psychopathic killer. Drawn to the ship again that night, Brandon breaks the lock on the cellar door and begins levitating in front of the spacecraft while chanting the ship's alien message. Seeing red lights emanating from the barn, Tori runs in and severs this connection, causing Brandon to fall and cut himself on the ship, revealing his kryptonite and his only weakness. While reviewing the first injury he's ever had, Brandon asks his mother who he was and where he came from. Tori admits that although she and Kyle may have lied about adopting him from the agency, he was still her son, before confessing that he'd actually come from the stars and the vessel that just cut him, a truth which causes Brandon to run away in anger. In this rage, Brandon's heat vision begins to manifest, and the alien message from the ship is finally translated in his head to mean, "Take the world," setting the boy out on a night of death and carnage against those that had wronged him, beginning with Caitlin's mother Erica, who had forbidden him from seeing Caitlin ever again. In one of the most terrifying scenes in the film, Brandon finds Erica alone at the diner and begins toying with her like a wolf by covering the windows with his symbol and shattering the lights above her, causing a piece to get stuck in her eye, which she painstakingly removes in a moment that certified the film's R rating. With blood obscuring her vision, we see Brandon appear and disappear to the left of her field of view, visually reinforcing the notion that he'd now transformed into Brightburn and was no longer redeemable. After terrifying Erica some more, Brandon eventually kills her and transports her to the farm. The following day at school, Brandon meets up with his aunt and school psychologist, Marilee, to discuss his attack on Caitlin. With Brandon ranting about being special and showing no signs of remorse for what he did, Marilee pleads with him to talk to her before informing him that she was required to update his parents, the school, and the sheriff in 2 days on his progress, or lack thereof. Agitated by his aunt, Brandon arrives at her home later that night and tells her that it would be bad for him, his parents, and especially bad for Marilee if she talked to the sheriff. With his aunt refusing to give in to his demands, Brandon lies and tells her that he was going home, before donning his Brightburn costume and stalking her around the house. When she goes to bed, Noah arrives and finds Brandon in the closet. Brandon pleads with his uncle and asks if he was going to tell his parents, and Noah foolishly tells him that it's the least he'll be doing, prompting Brandon to lash out. Noah then tries to drive away, but Brandon lifts his car up and hurls it to the ground, gruesomely killing his uncle in what can only be described as a morbid nod to Superman's first appearance in Action Comics issue number 1. What's more, Brandon uses Noah's blood to draw his symbol at the crime scene. Returning home without a shirt, Brandon explains to his parents that the other students had ripped it off in another incident of bullying, but both Tori and Kyle see through his lies. This distrust is magnified when Marilee calls Kyle and Tori to inform them of Noah's car accident and how Brandon had been in their home the previous night. Noah is announced dead at the hospital the next morning, and when Kyle and Tori tell Brandon of his death, the boy has no reaction, angering Kyle, who accuses Brandon of foul play in Noah's death and triggers Brandon into violently throwing his father up against the wall. Realizing what Brandon was on his way to becoming, Kyle plans an impromptu hunting trip as a ruse to kill the boy, but when he shoots him in the back of the head with a hunting rifle, the bullet bounces off. Betrayed by his father, Brandon gives in to his anger and mercilessly burns a hole in his father's skull using his heat vision. What's sad is that up until that point, Brandon respected both his parents. He may not have always agreed with them, but there was definitely love there, and he genuinely cared about what they thought of him, which is why he often threatened people not to tell them anything. While understandable and arguably necessary by this point, Kyle's betrayal pushes Brandon past the point of no return. Meanwhile, the sheriff arrives at the Bryant residence and asks if he could see Brandon. When told that the boys had gone camping, he explains that he wanted to ask the boy about the strange symbol that was found at the scene of Erica and Noah's deaths. Having seen Brandon draw the symbol in his journal, Tori lies and feigns ignorance before telling him to leave her property. It's not until Tori begins going through his journal, which showed illustrations of the murders, his new persona Brightburn, and the message "Take the World," that Tori realizes her little boy was a superpowered psychopath on his way to becoming a powerful and callous serial killer. Tori then tries to call Kyle, but Brandon answers the phone instead and tells her that Kyle is gone. Although Tori immediately calls the sheriff for help, Brandon flies home and begins destroying the house before brutally murdering the sheriff and his deputy. Remembering that the only thing that could injure Brandon was the ship he came in, Tori makes for the barn and discovers Erica's mutilated body nailed to the wall, surrounded by Brandon's symbols. After arming herself with a piece of the ship, Tori embraces Brandon and tells him that there was still some good inside of him. And though he tells her that he wanted to be good, Tori tries to stab him and gets caught. Now completely consumed by rage as a result of being betrayed by his mother and the only link he had with humanity.
Everything's changed. Men fall from the sky. The gods hurl thunderbolts. Innocents die. That's how it starts. The fever, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel.